We need to talk about some fantasy books.
It is the perfect time of the year,
in my opinion,
to read a good fantasy book. And there's so many types of fantasy books to choose from. Which one's right for you? How do you get into fantasy? Which one am I gonna like the best? Which is the best time for fall? I'm gonna help you out. I'll be your fantasy book girly. But first,
we need some coffee.
there are literally so many types of fantasy books out there. I honestly think that there is a fantasy book out there for every single person. Whether you're liking something a little more
Cozy, low stakes, want some more romance, want something a little darker, you want all of the dragons.
like, there is something for everybody. I'm gonna break them down for you. I'm gonna give you some of my recommendations. So let's get into it. We're gonna start off first with
The cozies, okay?
the low stakes fantasies, if you will. These are the ones that I would recommend to literally everybody. These are probably my personal favorites in the bunch, only because I really enjoy a low stakes fantasy. I love the coziness it brings, the whimsy, how much it reminds me of a good
Fairy tale story.
I know these are probably mentioned a lot, but I'm gonna mention these anyway because why not? First things first, we're going to talk about Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Faeries by Heather Fawcett. If we're talking about a cozy fantasy, we're going to be thinking about the setting in a lot of ways. We're going to be thinking about the character, not so much the plot. These are books that I think are going to be a little more witty, a little more, I think, clever and funny, and less about the stakes of our main characters and the problems they're facing. So in Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Faeries, we have a professor who is writing the world's first encyclopedia of fairies for this university that she works for. She goes to this very nondescript town in what sounds like the Netherlands, honestly. And she's cooped up in this cabin. She has a big dog, and her and this dog just kind of like survey the surrounding areas. They kind of make friends with the townsfolk, and they learn about fairies in this town and how mysterious they are, because there's like tons of species. And unlike other fairy books that we've read in the past, this is going to be more sinister and mischievous fairies than a handsome fae that, you just fall in love with. Now, there is a romance subplot in here, and I think still this is something that everyone can read. Even if you're not a romance reader, you will enjoy this book. This is one of my all-time favorites. I think this will be yours as well if you're a fan of cozy fantasy, or if you have not read any type of fantasy before, you want to get into it, but you're not really a fan of the high stakes world building, anything like that. This is very thin, very easy to get through. You'll love it. Another fantasy book that I recently read, have fallen in love with. This is one of my new all-time favorites, and I will be talking about this book for a
Very, very, very long time.
that is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. Unlike Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Fairies, our main character is more so the sunshiny, naive, unsuspecting, unassuming main character that kind of finds herself in trouble, whereas Emily Wilde is more grumpy and very steadfast in her work and her research, and she's kind of not understanding of social cues. Whereas this girl is definitely more girly, frilly. I just absolutely love her. And again, this is not a high stakes book. We have her working as an assistant to a villain, and she works in his lair, and it's got all of the fun things that you can think of. It's definitely, I think, a satire. So if you're wanting something that you can kind of just laugh along with this book, you will really enjoy this. It also has a lot of banter, and both of these books are the first in a series, so stay tuned for more books. It also kind of reminds me of Shrek in the layout of the Shrek universe, if you will. So if that means anything to you, I think you will really enjoy this book. But if you are a fan of grumpy sunshine romances and you don't really want spice, you don't care for spice, definitely read this book. Either of these books honestly would be well for a grumpy sunshine, because even though this girl is grumpy and this girl is sunshiny, the male characters are the opposite. So we're gonna have grumpy sunshine both ways. Moving along to something a little more fantasy, a little more world buildy, but still very whimsical, enchanting, easy to read writing, and you will fly through it, And this is a 3-book series that is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. So we're going to highlight that book, even though you should read, obviously, books 1 and 2 in the series. This one is going to have a little bit of higher stakes and a little more romance. Still no spice, but I just think that it kind of borders a line between more in-depth fantasy worlds and a cozy fantasy. So this one treads the line, but I still recommend it. And I think that if you are new to fantasy, you should read this book. If you're looking for something a little cozier, you should read this book. We have a girl on the hunt, on a trek, on a journey, searching for her one true love, and she will do whatever it takes to get it, including making friends, making allies with someone who is not so great. So that is very vague, but you know.
You just gotta stick with me. You just gotta believe that I have your best interests at heart here.
And like I said, if you don't want to read this one, go ahead and watch my full-length video. Get yourself a beverage for it. It's a good time. But now we're going to move on to something a little darker, a little more fantasy, with more world building, a little more spice. And that is going to be the ever so favorite Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This book is
Everywhere.
And I would say for good reason, but also, are there better fantasy books out there that you could read? Potentially. If you are looking for something that is going to hit that romance itch for you, give you all of the enemies to lovers, hate to love type of situation, I think you'll really like this book. If you are new to fantasy and you're wanting to read something that's going to have more world building and more like magical creatures, like say dragons, then also check out this book. It's going to kind of tick all of those boxes for you. We also have a really fun element where we're in a school setting and this dragon academy, they're trying to become dragon riders, so it's very high stakes. Unlike my cozy fantasy books, this is very high stakes. There's a lot of dying and a main character who honestly is not treated very well for the majority of this book amongst her peers, amongst her mother. If you are a seasoned fantasy reader and you want something that's going to give you a little more romance and a little more of a good time than a regular high stakes fantasy, like say something with Brandon Sanderson, then I also think you should check this out because I think it will kind of segue you into romance. So whether you're trying to get into fantasy or get out of fantasy, this is a good book for anything in between. Another high stakes fantasy I wanted to recommend that I don't see talked about here very often, but it is beautiful, lovely. I need the physical copy because I read it on Kindle and I need it in my possession. This is not going to have magical creatures like we see in Fourth Wing or even our cozy fantasy books, but this definitely is considered a fantasy. And I think it's going to have a character we all know and love, and that is Anastasia by Sophie Lark. This book has easily become one of my favorite discoveries on Kindle that I just kind of stepped into not knowing I was going to be finding a new 5-star read, and I did. This book obviously tells the story of Princess Anastasia, the Romanov family, and if you've seen the movies, you know how it ends. This is going to have a little twist on it, but it's still going to have a lot of fantastical elements because the family all have magical abilities. So do other people in the story. So it kind of takes a spin off of the fairy tale we all know and love, or the movie I should say. It is going to be dark and twisty. It is going to have some really sad moments. I honestly cried a couple of times reading this book, but in a good way. Nevertheless, I think you should still read this because who doesn't love Anastasia? Who doesn't love Dmitri? And who doesn't love Rasputin? I mean, come on. He's just a villain we all know and love to hate, and he's in here. So if you want Anastasia and you want magic, go ahead and give this a try. I think it's gonna scratch the itch for people that love fairy tale retellings, Disney princesses, things like that, with a little dark and twisty edge to it. Also really nice for the fall season because, you know, if you're wanting something a little creepy, a little spooky, this is going to have kind of everything that you're looking for. So give it a try. Another new release that actually released, I think, last month or the month before. Haven't gotten to it yet, but I do think it is worth mentioning. And that is The House of Roots and Ruin, which is book 2 in House of Salt and Sorrows, which is written by Aaron A. Craig. This is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. Again, dark and twisty little fairy tale thing. So if you're wanting a fairy tale fantasy story that is going to kind of scratch the itch from anyone that grew up loving Disney movies or reading fairy tales growing up. I think you will really like these. They are considered young adult, but they are also dark. Like, stuff happens in here that is kind of creepy, very sinister. We have villains that are very villainy. And A House of Roots and Ruin does follow one of the sisters in this book. So I do, again, recommend it if you're looking for something that is more gothic while still scratching the itch of fantastical elements. We've got magic, we've got world building, we've got politics. We've got a little bit of romance subplot in here as well, so it's got a little bit of everything if you're looking for something a little darker. Now for our dark academia lovers, if you are a fan of The Secret History, if you read The Maidens, If We Were Villains, any of these books, I think you will really enjoy The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew. This is a dark academia, and our main girl, who is deaf, by the way, she goes to this academy to understand how to travel between parallel worlds. We've got professors that are mean to her. We've got rivals to lovers. We have academic rivals. We have some creepy stuff going down in the school and trying to solve a mystery. So if you're looking for something with a school setting, still with fantasy elements, this is a great option. Do I understand the significance of this weird rib cage? No, I do not. But we're now going to segue into our very last fantasy recommendation that I think is going to be perfect for anyone looking for a fantasy world that's not really so much fantasy as it is like politics based. King Arthur. Think kingdoms and kings and queens and assassins. Enemies to lovers. That, my friends, is Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. These books are so good. You can also find these on Kindle, I believe, and there is a prequel series. I don't necessarily think you need to read the prequel series to understand what's happening here, but they do mention stuff in the prequel series in this duology. But I digress. We have 3 women that are part of the Queen's Guard, and they are kind of tasked to assassinate this new leader of this realm very far away. Their lives end up getting intertwined somehow. We have a lot of lies, deception, thievery, romance. This was a very quick read, and again, if you're not really caring too much about magic so much as you really enjoy just good politics and understanding different kingdoms and maps and how all of that works, I think you will really enjoy this duology. It's easy to get through, even though it is a little chunkier. Our characters are beautiful. This is dual POV. You will fly through it. You will fall in love. And I gotta say, book 2 is even better than book 1, if that's possible. But yeah, it's not gonna be so much magically based as any of the other books I mentioned in this video, but sometimes you just don't really need that, you know? But let me know what you think. What are some fantasy book tropes you really enjoy? Do you think any of these fantasy books seem interesting to you? I would love to know in the comments. I also have some more videos down below in case you're interested in more book recommendations. But that's gonna be it for me. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll catch you in my next video. Mwah. Bye!